Hello everyone, today I will show you how I expose S-Log2 on the Sony ZV-E10. But first, allow me to explain why I shoot in S-Log2. It all comes down to 8-bit versus 10-bit colors. Unfortunately, the Sony ZV-E10 is not capable of shooting in 10-bit. The difference between 8-bit and 10-bit is that on 10-bit, you have more color information to work with. It's 1 billion colors on 10-bit versus 16 million colors on 8-bit to be precise. Therefore, if I'm going to shoot in something as flat as S-Log3 on Sony ZV-E10, the image will not look great. But if you still want to maximize the dynamic range out of your 8-bit Sony camera to make the image more cinematic, S-Log2 is a great option. It's not as flat as S-Log3, it will give you roughly 10-11 stops of dynamic range, and when properly exposed, it looks fantastic. Here are my S-Log2 settings on the Sony ZV-E10. I use picture profile 7, gamma set to S-Log2, color mode is set to ITU 709 matrix. I'm using ITU 709 matrix and not S-Gamma3 Cine because S-Gamma3 Cine is too demanding for 8-bit Sony cameras. Kelapai from DSLR Video Shooter made a great video about that. You can check it out right here. It basically explains why shooting in ITU 709 matrix is much better with 8-bit Sony cameras compared to shooting with the S-Gamma3 Cine on 8-bit Sony cameras. Last setting that I changed is detail. I set mine to -7. Now let's get to the most important part, which is properly exposing S-Log2. If you want to get the least amount of noise with S-Log2, you need to expose as bright as possible, or in other words, you need to overexpose the image, but usually it's never more than 2 stops. Then in post-production, you bring down the exposure to the correct level. Since I'm not using an external monitor, I heavily rely on zebras for exposure. When I expose for my skin, I set the zebras to 72 IRE, and once the zebras cover all the highlight part of my face, then I know that I'm properly exposed. Well, I shouldn't say properly because at 72 IRE my skin is overexposed by 2 stops. If I would set the zebras to about 62 IRE, I'd be overexposed by 1 stop, and at 50 IRE my skin would be correctly exposed. But again, when I shoot in S-Log2, I always overexpose my image to get the cleanest shadows possible. Usually it's by 1 stop and sometimes it's by 2 stops. If I expose for the sky, I set the zebras to 95 IRE and adjust the exposure until the zebras completely disappear. To get the least amount of noise, I try not to expose with ISO, but rather with the lens aperture, the lower the better, or shutter speed. Another important factor is of course setting the correct white balance in the camera to get the best colors. If I'm shooting in daylight, I'm going to use daylight white balance preset. Otherwise, I would use my gray card and set a costume white balance. You definitely don't want to mess up the white balance and then try to fix it in post because it's going to take a lot of time, especially with an 8-bit Sony camera. Which leads me to the next point, color correction. All I do is import the clip to Final Cut Pro, open the color wheels and waveforms, bring down the midtones, shadows, slightly raise the highlights. Then because on ZV-E10 the skin tones usually lean towards magenta red, I open hue saturation curves, select hue versus hue dropper tool, click on my skin and slightly push the red towards orange. That's it. After that you can start color grading your footage as normal, or you can use a creative LUT from your favorite creator. But remember not to push the colors too much because again, this is an 8-bit camera, not 10-bit. You can do some color grading but nothing crazy as with 10-bit cameras. Honestly, it's pretty simple exposing S-Log2 with the ZV-E10. You just need to know for what you're exposing for the skin, for the sky, for something white, for something dark. And for the most part, you have to overexpose by 1 stop or 2 stops to get the cleanest image possible. If you have any questions or comments, let me know down below. I hope you found this video informative and useful, and I guess I will see you in the next one. Peace.